Let's hear it for the boys. Let's give those boys a hand for the latest episode of the show. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
On
ice.
Yes, we're going to be doing
You're
this
not
episode
on
on
ice.
ice. You can't see, we're on Zoom, but we all got our ice skates on for Vought on Ice. We're going to be talking about Season 4,
Dangerous.
Episode 3. We'll keep the red flag flying here, so if you haven't watched it on Prime Video, check it out. This is the last of the 3-episode block that they rolled out on Premiere Day. So yeah, there you go. Lots of unanswered and open questions at the end here. Big stuff going down, but brief bit of a recap. The boys are still all over the place. They all got their own things going on, much to the frustration of MM. But the big stuff that's going down is Frenchie is dealing with the revelation, at least to us, the last episode, that he killed Colin's entire family. Not dealing
Casually
very well.
dropped.
Very
Remember, you
casually.
killed his family? He's like, yeah.
The hardest part was he was like, and it didn't stop here. You kept doing it. That next shot was even
that's
worse.
where we delve into this episode. Kimiko, we find out more about, is dealing with the Shining Light terrorist cell that is in New York. Seems like there's a connection from her past as well. Annie also has some connections from her past. We find out this episode about her connection with Firecracker. Turns out, to put it lightly, she was a real jerk to her back in the day, and that leads to these two light-based heroes clashing in a big way. Hughie, on the other hand, clashes with, but finally makes some sort of amends with his mother. He finds out why she left him, why she left the family. It's a pretty heartbreaking reason, having to do with postpartum depression. Over to MM. His big move this episode is he wants to flip A-Train, and it seems like he's making some progress there, as A-Train is, in fact, very conflicted about everything going on. And our final non-member of the team is Butcher, who, after playing a little video game with Ryan, invites him over to the house for some foosball and dosed cookies. He doesn't end up giving dosed cookies, but Joe Kessler, played by Negan, Jeffrey Dean Morgan himself, really doesn't like it, leading to maybe a little conflict between these two characters as well. Over to the 7, a lot of stuff going on with those folks too. Homelander is very frustrated about everything that's going on with Ryan, but he's working with and kind of against Sister Sage. Sage correctly predicted that Homelander would not stand for somebody being smarter than him. She's still making her moves as well.
Making moves for sure.
Big moves.
Yes, they want to get a soup
moves.
in every city, in every aspect of law enforcement, basically controlling America. Meanwhile, Dakota Bob is going in the opposite direction, much to Newman's chagrin, where he wants to shut down soups for good and get them to be the entertainers that he thinks, and we know that they are. So hashtag Dakota Bob was right. Let's get that trending. Meanwhile, on other soup news, Black Noir continues to look for his motivation, which is hilarious.
So fun.
Deep flexes a little bit and ends up hooking up with Sister Sage by the end of the episode, which is a wild twist that I personally did not see coming. Firecracker continues to be a fringe nutso. And yeah, I'm sure there's some more things that I am skipping over, but why don't we get into it? I just wanted to start off with a broad thing. This show, and this is like just the basics of television, but I think they do it so well. They're doing such a good job of having the overarching plot mixed thematically with character parallels every episode. And I say this because I've watched a lot of other shows recently that are like, here is a 40-minute chunk of our story. Now here's the next 40-minute chunk of our story. And this, they are moving the plot, but also the idea with everybody of like buried things in your past that are going to come up in some way, one or another, and either you deal with them or you don't, ties into, I think, every single character in this episode, and it's so smartly written and done.
Well, and I think because this show sort of has the opposite formula when it comes to plot and character. Like so many shows, it's just like, okay, character doing stuff, and then let's get to a big block of plot. This show like is sort of hustling through the plot, and then they pause on a character moment and really, like, I thought that was what was so great about the Hughie and his mom scene. It felt like there's so much plot, and then he's like, yeah, I had a bad day, but this is the important thing, and we get all that. The plot is so intense, and we're seeing so much stark violence and everything that it feels bigger than it is. And that lets us enjoy the character moments more because we're sort of in shock from watching ice fingers.
Oh, stop. Oh, my God. I forgot about that for a second.
One
Just
of
real
my
quick on
number
that.
one fears, by the way.
Oh,
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. What I love about that moment is like the only soup damage is when Homelander cuts Maeve in half. It's all just ice skating accidents after that.
Maeve, not the actual Maeve.
Yeah, it's all just ice skating accidents that could happen in our real world at any moment.
Yeah. And
And
almost
the
every day in
chaos
ice skating rinks.
that-
And it's covered up by the deep state.
By big
Jesus,
figure
don't
skate.
say
Everyone loves Olympic figure skating, but what you don't know is all those people are basically fingerless. They just have thumbs left. And watch closely. That's why AI has a hard time making fingers, is because big figure skates trying to get them to fix their hands for the Olympics this season. That's my conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
If we could get back to your point instead of going on this insane
No.
rant.
I do want to stay on the Vought on ice thing for a second, just because obviously that's like the ass eating thing for the last episode. That's the standout, gross out scene of the episode. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, they absolutely crush it with this ice show. Like,
so good.
The lip synced voices, the song, the War on Christmas song, and everything that they did there.
Put the
I don't
Christ
know who the
back in
cast was. They
Christmas.
definitely sound like Adina Menzel singing the Queen Maeve part, but I don't know. They didn't credit her.
Yeah, I sort of doubt that. What I think they nailed so hard is like sort of bad musical theater songwriting so well in that moment. And this is a case where you can really see the money on the screen with all the detail, all the like sort of shitty versions of the soup costumes that they put on the figure skaters. Those are all like made specifically for this 30 seconds we see them in the episode. And that's where like you see that Amazon money in a less like not just a giant explosion that looks cool, in a much more interesting, funny way, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, just to get back to something you're talking about, the little moments that kind of echo throughout all the characters and the way that they not only are affecting each other, but also kind of bouncing off of things and how they deal with stuff. Like that one bad day, like we get to see other people on the other side of that, you know what I mean? And how it affects them all. And yeah, it's just really impressive. And this kind of thing of like, why? Like so many characters are in this episode saying, why? Like, why, Mom, did you leave me? Why don't you love me? Homelander screams at his son. Like, why aren't I good enough for you? There's just so many kind of like things all happening to characters in interesting ways and not this kind of cookie cutter. It's really refreshing and inspiring in such a twisted and demented way. But oh my God.
Well, just to continue on the thematic thing, I think the thing that really came through this episode is about forgiveness for things in the past and whether you can forgive yourself. And none of the characters are doing that up until the mom, who I should have written down exactly what she says, but she does it the right way. Like, it certainly helps that Hughie is open to hearing her and wants to hear what she says, which is very different from the Starlight Firecracker conversation. But Starlight immediately is like, oh God, that was my past. I did that. That was so bad. I'm past that now. And the mom doesn't say that. She says something to the effect of like, I don't need your forgiveness, but I am sorry for what I did, and here's the reason that I did it. And that is how you apologize to somebody. Like I just said, obviously they need to be open to hearing that, which Huey is, but her story is, I mean, it's not exactly selfish, but she was basically like, it was a life or death. I took 40 Ambien, I threw them up, I realized I'm not going to get past this. It's been 8 years with postpartum depression. I got to change my behavior and I got to get out of this. And that ties into what we talked about the last episode about stucking in your rhythms of behavior and can you break out of them? And that ties into the whole show. It ties into the whole thing. Justin, I'm just blabbering. Go ahead.
Well, no, but that point you made last episode really stuck with me, and I do think that's the thematic for this season. And to reframe it in a more forward-looking thing, it feels like it's you have to choose your life, and like every character keeps doing these things that are pattern breaking that they're sort of starting to be rewarded for. Like Butcher comes clean with MM, he's punished for it. But in this episode, he doesn't give Ryan the cookies. And he comes clean with Ryan. He comes clean with Ryan, and he doesn't give him the cookies because he's like, you know what? I'm paying attention now. I'm going to make a choice here because what Ryan needs isn't to be drugged and captured so that we can save him. He needs more than anything a human connection from someone who like can actually say a real thing to him and he can say a real thing back. And so he actually gives him that, which is going to be more important. And that's the like low key thing that Butcher has done for every moment with Ryan through the series. And he's like, okay, this is actually what needs to happen. Same with Hugh and his mom. Like everyone is now coming around to being like, these old ways aren't working. Like Kimiko and Frenchie, like they're like sort of coasting on like, we're a team, we're a partnership. And they're like, wait, are we? What's happening here?
Well, that's the thing. Frenchie
sad.
kind of goes backwards where he reverts back to doing drugs. You know what I mean? Where you're kind of like, he's like, I just took a little amount. And, you know, he's tripping his fucking face off, you know? So, yeah, it is about like these characters growing and then sometimes kind of slipping backwards a little bit, because in the past Frenchie has been ahead of the curve, you know, he's been better than Butcher, he's been better, you know, but now Butcher's better than he is, so it's an interesting kind of thing they're messing with.
I don't know if Butcher is better than he is, but he's definitely making the right moves here because he's being honest and he's being forthright with Ryan, like we've been saying. I think the most interesting aspect, the most interesting character with this is Homelander, who is terrifying even with Ryan. When Ryan works against him, you can see him like clenching up and you're like, oh no, is he going to kill his own son? Because he absolutely could. But the place that he gets to at this end of this episode I thought was really interesting, where you could see like there's a wall in his head, and maybe it is a literal wall in terms of this red door he keeps picturing, but there is a wall in his head that he cannot get past. And he's like, why can I not connect with my own son? Like, why can't I do that? And he can't work past that. And ultimately, he has this like very Green Goblin moment where he's talking to himself in the mirror, and they're like, you need to go back to the start, John. You need to go home. So presumably, we'll see that the next episode. But
big Homelander episode coming next, I think.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's crazy that he's fracturing mentally. Except rather than it be a bunch of different faces and different like aspects of his personality, it's just all bad versions of him. I thought that was very telling.
It's almost scarier that way. You know what I mean? That they're all kind of like they look the same and stuff. As in comparison to the kind of Green Goblin thing that we've seen before. But I mean, it's really cool to see, like, because even at the start of it, they did a great job planting the seed of, like, here he is on stage singing the Pledge of Allegiance. He's loving it. And then the kind of eerie music plays, and he's looking out and he's focusing on all the negatives. You know, he's hearing all the kind of people who are against him, and it's driving him insane, you know. And that part where Firecracker was walking up to him and he couldn't hear her, I was like, oh, God, don't snap and just murder her because you weren't listening.
Well, he is. I mean, this is not a big revelation, but Homelander is a narcissist. That is his whole character. He cannot see or hear or anything beyond himself. They really dig into this episode. One thing I wanted to mention just before I forget about it, right at that first shot of the little white boys singing, that seemed to be such a clear visual shout out to Tomorrow Belongs to Me from Cabaret. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's almost the same shot where it starts with this kid in a white kid, like very blonde Aryan kid singing this song Tomorrow Belongs to Me. It's this beautiful angelic voice, and it slowly pans out in the movie version, and you see it's a Nazi rally that he's at. It's exactly the same thing that happens.
I bet it is, because when that kid appeared on screen, I was like, why is this kid so like Aryan? Like it was a very purposeful casting choice, I feel like, because the kid looked such a certain way. So I bet it's definitely that.
And I feel weird correcting this because who gives a shit, but isn't it Aryan instead of Aryan?
Anyways, I don't know.
Not sure.
One question I had, I do not know. One question I had is what the title means. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this is like a phrase or a saying. We'll keep the red flag flying here. Does anybody know what that means?
I think it's sort of a pun on we'll keep the flag flying, like American flag, but red flag, like there's severe problems here. This is a red flag. That's my guess. Because and Negan says it in the episode, and not to keep just calling him that name, but it is who he is. Yeah. He's like, we're hitting a wall here. This whole country's going to burn. And I think we're getting a lot of those flashing warning signs across all fronts between the meeting with Homelander, Sage, and Newman. Like, I think this episode is going to really perhaps transform the larger landscape of the show in a way previous seasons haven't, based on the little red flags we're watching here.
Yeah. One standout sequence while we're just jumping all over the place and chatting about stuff. Man, Hughie climbing through the vents.
Oh my God.
Sweating
That
on
whole.
Homelander. I can smell fucking Hughie Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
So
he
good.
smells Hughie. He smells Butcher. How many smells does he have logged
I
up?
don't
What's his
know.
smell lexicon like?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
right.
like. And is he like, you know what? I'm going to remember your smell. Because you got to
It was-
file it away.
But
It
that
was
whole
funny-
like lasering the vents, also gophering into the vents and sort
Oh
of like
my
looking around.
Yeah,
Funny and
so
terrifying
funny.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, pairing that fear for our hero, who we know is the most vulnerable character
Yeah.
on the show, with the funny / violence of all the ice skating stuff, I was laughing out loud because the ice skating stuff was so funny. And I'm not usually a like horrifying violence is hilarious thing, but man, that got me. It was so good.
The
'Cause they're
combo
singing
of
the
it.
song, and then she just gets sliced right there. Man, it got
The
me.
finger sliced off. The funniest shot to me though was Jesus doing like the high point with the skate and slashing somebody's neck as he leaves the arena. That was great.
That
So
was
crazy.
Punch up joke at the end. It's a Vought coin arena, so it's clearly like a whole Bitcoin thing as well.
Yeah.
They just keep
Yeah.
piling
His
stuff.
show
on there.
does not miss. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so good.
And it was funny too because as he was getting into the vents, Huey was like, "Man, it's hot as balls up here," and I was just like, "Okay, that's a funny line, but why is he saying that?" And then I was like, "Oh, I get it." The tension of the watching the bead of sweat go down, and you're just like, "Oh God, where's it gonna hit?" Because you can like the shot that you can kind of see Huey right there, and I'm thinking like, how does Homelander not smell or sense? Hear his breathing or something, you know what I mean, with the super hearing. So like the fact that like he immediately knew who it was just so kind of, oh man, it was
a great moment.
intense, hilarious. I mean, just everything the show is. There's so many things going on at once. It was a real kind of circus of
It was a
of
Cirque du
events.
Vought in Montreal.
Who else should we talk about? Let's talk about the Annie Firecracker stuff because I thought this took a really interesting turn. Obviously, we side with Annie. We love Annie, but
Not anymore.
oh, are you anti-Annie?
Wow.
Anti-Ann?
I mean, that's cold as ice. I mean, I'm not Team Firecracker by any sense of the, but I was just like, well, what are you going to
But
do
some
to
of her
Annie? What's
ideas
the
are kind of interesting, right, Pete?
You're like a hometowner guy, right?
No, I'm just saying that.
I believe
like,
you were in the episode at the beginning. There was the guy in the crowd saying "string her up." That was you, right?
And when
Annie's been
Todd
this-
died, you seemed very upset, like weirdly, like ugly sobbing.
When
Todd,
Annie's been this perfect kind of angel in the show, and it's nice to, I mean, not nice, but I was just surprised by the reveal that, like, Annie's been this perfect thing. Her mom's been the crazy one about pageants. So to kind of hear that she did kind of take on this part of her mom and was worse, maybe, than her mom in some ways with that. I mean, that's ruins a kid. She basically murdered her kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say that
Well,
extreme, but I do think that ties into another thematic thing that they're constantly playing with is like what parents do to their children, very specifically this episode with Huey's mom and what he did to Huey, Homelander and Butcher, both being the my two dads for Ryan, but also here, you know, maybe Annie was awful back in the day, but also she was probably just picking up on what her mom did and the pageant circuit and all of that stuff. So starting a rumor that she gangbanged the judges, it's inexcusable. And she realizes it's inexcusable and she doesn't know how to work it out, as she explains later to Frenchie Kimiko, that she's like, taking responsibility for my own actions is really tough. But you know, that's, you ape what your parents do in a certain sense. And then as you get to adulthood, she was 13 by that point, you got to start owning your own mistakes. And Annie's learning that a little too late.
well, and I think a lot of the point is like it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's something that the show seems interested in. Something in our world, like people make mistakes, and it's like a big problem. It's like cancel culture, all that. It feels like, and the show is sort of, I think, taking an apolitical look at that, which is great. But like the point is, like we were saying before, like you can break out of those mistakes. You can make a different choice. And I think that's what we have to ride with Starlight, as she has to own this mistake before we can see her make a different choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great. Let's talk about the stuff with Ashley as well. We get some great Ashley stuff in this episode where she's completely fed up. She is demoted to figurehead.
That firing scene, where she's now the mascot and she keeps dropping the. Oh my god,
so funny! Such a great physical comedy.
Yeah.
Moment.
Oh my god. Yeah.
And also cutting to her in the office talking to Cameron Coleman, who's trussed up, and she's clearly dominating there. Very funny. What was the line? She's like, "Who wants to have their balls crushed?" And he's like, "Me." Very funny.
Very good. And then sort of the back end of that, or the other end of that scene, was when they are interviewing Annika, I think her name was, who was communicating with Starlight.
Oh my
yeah,
god.
she was
That scene-
Annika. She was in Crime Solutions, or whatever the department is that the Deep was formerly running. She appeared last season, maybe the season before as well.
Yeah, the crime analytics department that the Deep really wants to run, apparently. That scene I thought was great for the Ashley of it, where she's just instantly shredding her resignation letter right afterwards. I was like, smart. And then that scene I just thought was just a great, like, Sage is, quote unquote, the smartest person in the world, but she still gets foiled by Homelander's actions. And, like, they seem like they're a powered duo, but they're going to get in each other's way constantly. And I think that's going to be fun to watch. When he kills her in that moment, I was like, just another great writing.
That was insane because she was like mid-sentence and he was like,
Sage's line after that was so funny. That they're like, you don't think the next word out of her mouth
could have been helpful?
Crazy.
But the Sage of it all is very interesting. I was kind of a little disappointed about showing the human side of Sage a little bit, because I felt like she was really going to be this kind of like evil nemesis that's working her way up through the system and going to take over. But then showing her kind of like with Homelander, they're kind of whisper fighting back and forth, and they're almost having this kind of like brother sister kind of like biting at each other, where they almost don't take each other seriously and just kind of are dealing with it. And then you kind of get this moment where I was like, all right, cutting to her, she's having a bloomin' onion. That's kind of funny. But then
that's what I was going to say.
The reveal.
They finally showed a human side of her. She's eating a bloomin' onion, laying down, and then fucks the Deep. I was like, that's human? That's like, you identify with that behavior?
Well, I just think it was, I wanted more, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted her to,
more calories. You want
like an onion, there's layers. I wanted there to be, another layer to her.
The most disgusting part of that scene to me was the Deep eating the blooming onion with his gloves on. Like, take your gloves off, man.
Yes.
And then licking
That's the
gloves.
most. No, the grossest part was she was rubbing the onion on his face like a tentacle, like, you know, she's almost like an octopus.
I think that was intentional.
Like you've never done that.
Well, here's a couple. That scene was very funny and cool. But two things about it. From a production point of view, I don't know how they kept that bloomin' onion looking anywhere near warm.
That's not a real onion.
Because you got to get that bloomin' onion from an Outback, unless they're frying them on set. Crazy. What a
That's
great
probably
snack.
made out of wood or something. It looked so.
You eat that at lunch on set, the entire crew's napping for the whole second half of the day. So I don't know how they keep that. And then it does feel intentional. We get the scene early in the episode where the Deep is sort of not really into his octopus teacher quite as much anymore.
Yes.
And then he hooks up with Sage.
Which he's cheating.
She feels like he's cheating.
Yeah, he's cheating on the octopus with.
Well, what is it like
Sage.
when you're dating cross species?
Yeah.
It's similar. Just because it's a different species doesn't mean it's not cheating. It's still cheating.
Well, I feel like it's only cheating if he has sex with a second octopus.
What?
I agree with that. Pete, though, you're wearing that shirt right now that says, gotta get that octopusy. So how do you feel about this?
I just think if you're going to be in a relationship, you got to be in that relationship. You know, you got to be honest with the octopus and say, listen, this isn't working.
Pete, is that a James Bond reference on the? Because if that's not, I don't know what that shirt is from.
You're going to end up on a watch list somewhere. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for
I have
making
a
up a
question
shirt
for you guys.
and then putting me on a watch list.
As the Deep and Sage are hooking up on top of the Blooming Onion or whatever's going on there, the camera pulls out and there's a bloody metal stick.
Yeah. What
I was like,
that?
what is that?
Is that something from the, like all the chaos that happened with the skaters and that kind of stuff that I don't know.
I was racking my brain. I was like, did I miss something? And I was like, I swear I didn't.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see about that.
Who did somebody else get murdered that we didn't get to see?
I don't know. Wait until
Because
next
a
mystery to find out.
Well, I wonder if there was like one skater that got away and she was like, well, you can't, if one person tells them what happened here, we're fucked. So maybe she murdered that person with the stick.
I mean, I just feel like that
stick.
It's a murder stick.
It is a murder stick, yes.
There's going to be something here because I think we're going to get whatever Sage's motivations is. It feels like she's up to something. It feels intentional. How would you ever just casually order a bloomin' onion at home? That is reckless behavior.
There's probably an Outback at the bottom of Vought.
It's reckless to be hungry and order a bloomin' onion?
A bloomin' onion? That's excessive when you sit down at a restaurant and they bring it from the fryer to your mouth in like 30 seconds. That thing turns into like caloric goo the second it leaves the door. It's like when the Holy Grail...
Right? They have a seesaw and a guy jumps on it to be like... Whew.
Gonk. That's like when the Holy Grail leaves the temple in Last Crusade. Then the whole thing falls apart. That's when a bloomin' onion leaves an Outback Steakhouse. It's over. You can't eat that thing once it's out of the Outback.
I think we touched on his stuff a little bit earlier, but just to talk more about A-Train, I continue to really like his arc here and how conflicted he is. The scene with MM trying to recruit him and flip him, I thought was great. Just MM is exactly the right person to... Have they interacted before? I'm not 100% sure, but like the way MM digs into everything that's been going on with A-Train, from dressing up in his Black Power costume to having a racist heart and how it may have actually changed him. I thought that whole speech was great. And then the fact that he saves Hughie and doesn't say anything about it at the end, and Hughie's like, why would you do that? Really, really well done. Very interested in this whole plot line.
Yeah, I really loved the MM A-Train interaction. And also when A-Train sees him, he's like, Hughie's guy? You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't even know him as his own thing. So I thought it was like great to get them together. And I love the MF Doom hoodie that Milk was rocking. But man,
you were going to call that out.
I also love the fact that he's like giving a shit gets people killed. It's an interesting philosophy in the show.
He is 100% correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need a whole section where we have Pete handles the milk drip. Like we got on the milk drip.
The milk drip corner.
Just following up on a conversation we had the last episode about Sage's motivations, and I know we've talked about her quite a bit, but I thought it was very telling towards the beginning when she's forced to wear a costume and join the Seven, and she's talking to Homelander being like, I never wanted to be out front. I don't want to be the face of this. It doesn't work if I'm the face of this. And she says, wait, I wrote it down. He says popularity is power, and she says it's a prison. And I think that defines exactly what's going on here. I'm very curious, given the whole Outback Steakhouse hooking up with the Deep of it all, whether popularity is going to change her, because I think it's very hard to not be in front and not have that change you in some way. But that's her whole thing, is she wants to be behind the scenes wrecking shit, and she's not getting to do that right now because of Homelander.
But it's interesting, this meeting of philosophies, because in some ways she's obviously so much smarter than Homelander, but also Homelander's also pulling stuff on her, because he's like, no, I need you in the light where I can see you and keep an eye on you. Yeah. That's why I'm making you fucking do this. And she doesn't realize that. But then when she says, like, this is a prison, not power, like, he doesn't realize that yet. Like, I think that's part of the reason, like, he breaks in this episode is, like, he's way over his head and kind of in his own prison that he built, so it's a lot going on.
That's super smart, Pete, because I feel like the narcissism part of Homelander is weakening Sage's power because he's like, you have to be like me, I'm the best. And that makes her way less smart. And I think another take I think the show's putting out that you can be as smart as you want to be, but you think you're invulnerable to these temptations. Buckle up. Bloomin' Onion's coming to your door.
As I'm looking through my notes of the episode, the hardest scene to watch, I thought, was when the guy comes in with a gun to Starlight House and basically does the Pizzagate thing. Down to their kids are kept in the basement. We don't have a basement. Same thing with that pizza shop that the Pizzagators were targeting.
Ripped from the headlines.
Yeah.
That scene.
So very upsetting to watch, but I also appreciated Frenchie taking that guy down immediately, like Jason Bourne or whichever character he referred to as. So that was very good. Also, great line when they're talking about why Sister Sage and Firecracker have been added to the Seven, and MM says Elon Musk has more charm than she does, and he's half android. Very
great. Great joke. Just to jump on like great lines, Firecracker going at she says a vaccines cause autism thing, and
not
a different
the good
show.
Autism, the Rain Man, not the good Rain Man kind. I lost it at that line.
They take like a real conspiracy theory. A different show would do something a little different, and they go so hard at it and then spin into a joke. That's the kind of like writing courage I think is so great to see on this show.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that like you talk about writing courage, they're Homeland or Butcher's talking to Ryan, and while Ryan is talking with them, he's literally murdering Butcher. You know what I mean? So like through the violence of not only the show and the violence that Ryan struggles with, we have the violence in video games as well. Like it's really impressive what's going on.
that was a very intense cutscene of
the video game. Let's talk about that for a second. This is another
pops
thing.
Out of me, Jesus.
That was gross, but it is again incredible. They filmed this a year and a half ago at this point, or something like that, and Homelander, relatively speaking, just got added to Mortal Kombat as a character. Like, the timing on that is wild to me that they did it. Just to read that off, because I thought it was fun, I loved Butcher's login, don't be a cunt. Very funny. The finishing move was disgusting. And I wrote down who you could play. So the load screen has Maeve, A-Train, Black Noir, and Homelander. And then the playable characters were A-Train, the Deep, Crimson Countess, Homelander, Black Noir, Queen Maeve, Web Weaver, Tech Knight in costume, which we haven't seen before. I'm pretty sure it was like super tiny, but it was definitely his head.
Super tiny.
Lamplighter, Gunpowder, Polarity, Translucent, which is the funniest. That joke just keeps going. I think Termite, the little dude who exploded the penis. There's a couple of shrinking heroes, so I wasn't sure. And another very fun Ezekiel, who is the preacher with the stretchy arms, who showed up in, I want to say, season 1 or something like that. Like you can play a preacher is very funny. So there you go. But good stuff there. I loved Ashley's line, her complaining about not going to the doctor in 3 years and saying she has enough yeast infections to open a Panera.
She just had like 3 banger jokes back to back right there.
What else?
A couple, I'll jump in here. The end critical soup theory, I thought was a great little in-world twist. Then again, back on the Sage Deep scene, like, let's watch Transformers 2. Yeah. That's when I knew she's up to something, because no one wants to watch that.
The one with the racist robots.
Robots.
Also, the follow-up line, were you about to say this?
I was about to say this. Shia wants him to be in Honey Boy 2. Oh, man. That's a fucking sharp. That's like a direct roast of Shia LaBeouf, and they just do it on this show for no necessary reason.
That was great. Also, Frenchie's story about being like, I needed to sit in a bathtub for an hour while my dad had sex with prostitutes, and being told this like this inspiring, heartwarming story about his youth. Yeah, very funny as well.
It was really weird and twisted, especially the fact that he was like, I liked being in the bath. It seemed like it was a torture device, but it was very interesting.
I also hate baths.
Oh, interesting.
And two last things I'll mention. Black Noir mentions he studied performing arts at Godalkin. Another shout out to Gen V. Very funny there.
Is he going to be a Gen V?
I don't know.
Someone
in,
from Gen
in the
V?
comics, and I think they pretty definitively not gone this way, but in the comics, Black Noir is revealed to be an even worse Homelander clone, which was
Yeah.
my speculation before the season began. But now, yeah, I guess he's somebody. Like, I don't think he's any of the characters we've seen on Gen V.
Yeah. And any of the main characters. I would have to go back and sort of rewatch and see if there's a second tier character that he could be, because that would be so cool.
Homelander's face every time Black Noir is doing something is just so much fun. He hates him.
The reveal
so
that he's
much.
also narcoleptic was
Yeah.
So funny. Well, and that's what I love. The Seven has like sitcom logic to it this season. I love that. It's so funny to have it just be so many internal character jokes that are happening all the time.
Yeah.
Also,
Great.
I want to
Yeah.
just things that are fun. The Kamiko being like, "I'm a hacker now." Like when she smiles, man, it is just it's unbelievable. It's so great. And when Frenchie was tripping his face off, and there's like rubber duckies and tugboats everywhere. Oh my God, that was just such a fun. You talk about seeing the money in a creative way. Like what a unique way to show blood splattering all over the place.
Well, but that
and
also
such-
tees up the bathtub story, right?
yeah,
There's
yeah.
the bath toys.
Agree. Like the
Oh,
show's
wow.
always operating on so many levels. But just from a production point of view and editing, like the use of music in that scene is something that I thought was great and something I haven't really seen before, where the music actually cues you in and out of the drug trip or fantasy sequence. Like that was really, really well done.
And then the mother's Mel being like, "Hey, before you guys fuck off, are you gonna tell me what's going on?" And they both just give him the middle finger. That was just fun. That was just fun.
All right, all good stuff. Why don't we finish up here by talking about who was best boy this episode? Justin, I'll go to you first this time. Who was your best boy?
It's been really hard for me to not choose Homelander this season. So he's just so good. There's so much happening with him. He's able to toggle between the uber confident fascist monster and then the absolute fracturing nightmare like fail son that is also part of the character. And it's just amazing how Andy Starr can modulate so well without losing the sort of core and cohesion of this character who wears a fucking flag cape on his back. So good.
I'm going to throw it out to Huey's mom, I think, just because she is the character.
Huey's mom has got it going on.
Yes, so long. She's the one, like we talked about, who it not only reaches a real emotional catharsis, but gets Huey to an emotional catharsis. And it's a plot line that could feel like a side quest to keep Huey busy while other things are going on. But it's the emotional heart of the episode, and maybe the emotional part of the entire season. I guess we'll see. But I just thought that speech was great. Rosie Mary DeWitt absolutely crushed it. I was really impressed, and it really brought into focus everything that they were doing with this episode, to me at least. Pete, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, save Simon Pegg. I really hope he comes out of this coma and is going to be okay.
But what a plum gig, though, huh?
Just laying there. Just being like, "Yep, send my check." I just think the other side of that, Huey kind of, instead of attacking his mom, being like, "I've had a day. Like, let's just." He puts his guard down and goes, "Tell me your side. You know, I just want to know why you left me." Yeah, and I just think that also Huey kind of calling out like, "We need Butcher. You know, we need Butcher. We're a dysfunctional family, but we need everyone if we're gonna make a difference or kind of win." So, that's who I think is the best boy.
All right, there we go. If you want to support this podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We'd love to chat with you about the boys. Apple, Spotify, Android, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter/X, Comic Book Club Live on TikTok and Instagram, comicbookclublive.com. For this podcast and many more, until next time, you gotta hand it to the boys, I always say.
Watch the ice skating. You'll see the fake fingers. It's there, I swear.
Hey, what's in your fridge, man?